Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the owner and founder of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and this is a free personal development channel where we provide tips and tools for your subconscious mind. So today, I'm really excited about this topic. We're going to talk a little bit about the dismissive avoidant attachment style definition of what a healthy and intimate relationship looks like. And the reason I'm so excited to talk about this topic is that, after seeing so many different individuals, I found so many core patterns between people, not just on an individual level, but also just in terms of attachment styles and relationships and needs. And so what I'm going to share with you today is a very, very congruent pattern. I will say that there can be small exceptions to what I'll share, to this information, but that what I'm about to share in terms of the dismissive avoidance needs in a relationship for what makes them feel like good and healthy and connected, I would say these things surface about 95+% of the time. And I think it's just so interesting that we can have such different attachment styles and we can spend our lives. I see people who spend their entire lives, in a relationship, they've been together for 30, 40 years, and, they keep thinking that the other person doesn't love them because they are not going about the relationship in the way that they think it should go. Or, that the other person isn't supporting them because we are always basically trying to fit each other into our boxes of our perceptual filters of how things should be. And it can be such a limiting way of communicating, of interacting, and definitely of connecting. So once we understand each other's needs in the relationship, and once we have a little bit more self-awareness about what our needs are as well, then we can properly compromise and communicate. But without this self-awareness, or without the awareness of our partner and their needs, we become very limited in our capacity to understand each other, to hear each other, and thus to connect to each other. And so this is sort of the breeding ground space for resentment when we're not clear about these certain things. So for the dismissive avoidant, number one, and these are not in any particular order, these are just all of the core patterns that I see. But number one, the dismissive avoidant wants to feel supported. Okay? And support for the dismissive avoidant feels like a lot of the time they are being understood. Okay, so their emotions are being understood and not questioned. Their desires are being understood. Like if they just want to go for a walk suddenly, if they want to sort of go disappear and not answer their phone for a few hours, that doesn't come with any punishment or consequences. They want to feel like, you know what, you're naturally understood. Whatever you need to do, I see you, I hear you. I know that you have your own individual needs. And so a lot of what they derive support from is feeling like their autonomy is respected. Okay, and that's such an important thing. And almost always when I ask a dismissive avoidant attachment style what makes them feel most loved, they will almost always tell me the first thing is supportiveness. So again, I listed off a few pieces there, but supportiveness can also be that you're, cleaning up or looking out for them, or keeping them on track with their activities, asking them about their life and their next moves and how they can stay on track. Like a lot of this, just inquiring, asking, sort of helping them plan, giving them suggestions, advice, not in a way that seems critical at all, because that'll go in the exact opposite direction. You sort of have to tread carefully. But just that you care to show up for them in their life, and that you seem to understand some of their needs and hold space for them, okay? And needs specifically as they relate to autonomy, just so that's clear. The next thing, they really appreciate consistency. Dismissive avoidant attachment styles get really triggered when they feel like they have to read between the lines because it's really unknown for them. Their operating perspective, or their natural perceptual filter, is that everybody's sort of accountable for their own needs. So they're accountable for their own, and you're accountable for your own. And so when you're needing something from a dismissive avoidant partner and don't communicate it, but assume that they should know or should figure it out, and then, get upset and flustered when they don't and blame them, and they can't really understand exactly what you're upset about. If this is you, or this is your partner, it's really disheartening for them. It makes them feel so much more confused in relationships, and they tend to just shut off and withdraw. So they're great partners when you are clearly and explicitly stating your needs consistently. And this doesn't mean once. This means over time, you keep telling them specifically what it is that you're needing. And over time, these individuals, because they actually are quite sensitive and kind souls, and they're quite good-natured most of the time, they tend to respond really well to this. And they see that as a healthy bond. Like, hey, of course you should be able to tell me what you need. It's practical. That makes sense. Why wouldn't you? Why would you expect me to read between the lines and then punish me or get angry at me when I don't? That doesn't make any sense. And they get quite frustrated by this concept. This is a pattern I see almost always. Where it's just so frustrating to them. Like, why wouldn't you just be direct and just tell me? And part of this comes from the fact that, they are still, again, from this operating perspective, that they're responsible for their own needs and everybody else is responsible for theirs. And like for their own. And this comes from, as a child, not having enough emotional availability or physical availability from parents or caregivers. So they felt like they were out to survive and sort of figure it out for themselves. And so, this attachment style essentially feels like they can't rely on others at a very, very deep level. It's assumed that they can't. So when they start feeling like everybody's relying on them or other people are relying on them and they have to rely on themselves, it becomes quite scary for them. And this is why they tend to, part of the reason why they tend to withdraw so often. And so it's really important to understand that. And then to be able to clearly, explicitly communicate, and also to reinforce that, hey, I'll meet your needs too. We can rely on each other. Because again, sort of their natural operating perspective is like, everybody's out for themselves, and then when there's extra pressure applied, like, oh my gosh, I already can't rely on anybody but myself, and now you want me to take care of you too, and it feels overwhelming a lot of the time. And again, these are subconscious patterns, so this may not be something that the dismissive avoidant is like consciously aware of and can articulate, but if you inquire and check in through feelings, then you'll see that this pattern almost always exists. The next thing, they really want to feel unconditionally accepted. They want to feel like who they are is accepted. Dismissive avoidants, more than any other attachment style, tend to feel really, really hurt when they are not being accepted, when they're being criticized or shamed or something like that. It's so painful for them. And part of the reason for this is specifically because when they were a child, and how this attachment style essentially developed is that when they were a child, their needs were neglected to some degree, whether it was mentally, emotionally, physically, whatever the needs were, they were neglected. And as a child, we can't conceive of like why this is happening, why I'm being neglected. And we can't look at our caregivers who we have on this pedestal as if they're our gods when we come into the world and be like, oh, you know what, they're just not very well equipped to be parents at this time. Or, hey, they're not emotionally available to me and they have some work to do on themselves. We don't understand those things yet, of course. And so we tend to instead, as a dismissive avoidant, the dismissive avoidant tends to just make a self-interpretation that there's something wrong with me. Like, it's my fault, I am defective. Dismissive avoidants almost always have a defectiveness schema. And so when you shame them or criticize them, it basically activates and affirms their deepest core wounds. And again, these will be wounds that are very deeply subconscious. So it's not like they're going to be able to necessarily turn around and articulate, hey, your criticism really hurts me because it brings up a lot of pain I felt, before I could properly speak or articulate myself. That's not available to them. So all that happens is they hear criticism and they just shut way down because it's so painful. And then they don't want to be vulnerable again to you. It gets more and more difficult, especially if that criticism isn't like neutralized or it's sort of like not overpowered. There's a word I'm looking for, but basically if you have more validation that you're giving to your dismissive avoidant partner than criticism, they can withstand criticism a little bit better. When there's like not enough validation as it is, and then there's criticism, it's like, whew, they just can't take it. And this is more often than not when you'll see a dismissive avoidant start to sort of check out of the relationship. So they feel connected, just to review so far, because there's a lot of information, when they feel like you are predictable and safe. Okay, so this is a huge one because the predictability and safety is something that they lacked so much. It was such an unmet need as a child. Because imagine you come into this world and you truly feel like you can't rely on your caregivers. You enter into a world that doesn't feel safe, doesn't feel predictable. And so for you to open up and connect to somebody is really, really scary as it is, because you've stored your earliest relationship associations with some degree of intense pain. So they want to feel that you're predictable, that you are safe, that you are reliable. These are huge things. That you are supportive. You inquire about them. You actually care about them. You're kind of meeting these unmet needs from childhood for them. That you communicate really consistently and clearly. That you accept them. That you're not shaming or judging or criticizing them. A lot of times, a dismissive avoidant takes criticism as when they're not even being criticized. They assume that they're being criticized. So for example, if one partner says, hey, you're late, what happened? Because maybe, you're just worrying about what happened, or, why did you get stuck in traffic, or what's going on? I was wondering where you were. And maybe you're just opening a dialogue or conversation. In most cases, in these sorts of unclear situations, the dismissive avoidant tends to assume that you are criticizing and attacking them. Because again, they don't have a lot of positive associations to vulnerability, to closeness. They usually felt rejected or attacked in some way, even if just through the self-interpretation that they are defective because of a lack of emotional connection with a parent or caregiver. So they usually felt attacked in some form, whether it was just their interpretations of their parents' behavior, whether it was actual shaming and criticism, whatever it might be specifically. They tend to have a very low, immunity, basically, to any attack or criticism. So these are really, really important things. They really want to feel validated and affirmed. Sometimes the dismissive avoidant gets this bad rap of being like the taker, and they always want to take things and take advantage of others, and it's really not what's happening. It's just that they are naturally hoarding their resources because, again, they come from this emotionally based perspective that they're out for themselves and everybody else is out for themselves, and so they're in survival mode a lot more on average than the other attachment styles. More on a physiological level, their nervous system's been programmed with a little bit more fear as a general rule. And so they will tend to be less giving by nature because they're more in that survival mode. And then they tend to receive love as being all of the representation of what their unmet needs were. So when you're supportive and you do extra things for them or take care of them, or they're like, oh wow, this is what love must be like. And so they tend to receive it almost in awe, and they just take it all in, and they're not really sure what to do with it. And they haven't really made the link that, hey, I should be giving in response to this, and there should be an exchange of energy, because these weren't tools that they were shown in early childhood. So oftentimes dismissive avoidants get this really bad reputation for being takers and selfish and all these different things. We just need to be able to have these conversations with them, help them understand themselves, express your needs very, very clearly and explicitly. And then these people can be really great partners in relationships over time. But you have to teach them essentially how to meet your needs, and teach them as well that it's safe to rely on others and to give to others as well. It doesn't mean your resources are going to run out and everybody's going to abandon you in some way again, whether that be physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever other way, right? So this is just important to keep in mind. And sometimes dismissive avoidants will express themselves more easily sexually. Sometimes they can feel really, really comfortable having sex more often because there's sort of this, they show up and there's less threat there because they weren't having sex for the most part in really, really, really early childhood year ages. Hopefully they were not having sex at all. And so what happens is, because there aren't a lot of stored negative emotional associations around sex, and yet every single human being is wired for attachment, for intimacy, for connection. Sometimes sex is a safer place for them to actually connect and express themselves. Whereas, kind words, positive reinforcement, vulnerability, sharing of feelings, going out of your way to share your resources, your energy, your advice, these weren't things that they were given and seen, and oftentimes when they needed these things, they actually built negative associations in because they received a lack of them instead. And so, like, relative to what the need is. So a lot of times, dismissive avoidants can be people who like sleep around more and, you know, have that short-term connection. And I would say that occurs actually less than 95% of the time. Sometimes they're actually quite slow to move sexually because they still associate enough sexuality with any other form of connection. So it can really go both ways there. But all of the other key points were things that you're going to see 95% plus of the time. So I'm going to do a quick little review of these key points. Feeling supported, feeling consistent, feeling like you are communicating, feeling like they're being understood, feeling like their autonomy is respected, their freedom is respected, feeling unconditionally accepted, feeling like you are predictable and safe, feeling like they are being affirmed and validated. These are all such key points for the dismissive avoidant and what their idea is of a healthy relationship. And so what you want to do if this is you is start expressing that you need this from your partner. And what you want to do if this is your partner is start working to compromise your needs and express your needs very clearly, because they will respond to this, but also make space for their needs as well, and figure out how you can have these dialogues to more deeply understand one another. And to create change here. So I'm going to do a whole bunch more videos about the different needs for each attachment style for a healthy relationship, and what they expect. And then I'll go through a little bit of the dynamics in greater detail as well for each of the individuals separately. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it, subscribe to our channel, and please visit www.personaldevelopmentschool for client inquiries, for upcoming webinars, conferences, all kinds of stuff that we'll be holding throughout 2019. And we'll have free worksheets and stuff up there in the near future as well that are just tools, print-offs, things for you to just stay on top of everything, create good habits, communicate more effectively. And yeah, so thank you so much for watching, and talk to you soon.